What do you do when there's no way you can find motivation? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, this is Jill from the Northwoods, talking about how to make your life better, one small step at a time. You've known those moments, right? Those days where you have a task sitting there right in front of you, and you know it matters, and you know it mattered yesterday, it mattered last week when you should have done it. And somehow that knowledge hasn't moved an inch to get you to actually do the thing. And I thought that I was a responsible, functional adult, right? And suddenly I realized that just understanding that something was important wasn't always the way to motivate me to get to do it. I spent a long time when I was a kid thinking that something was actually very wrong with me, that I couldn't get myself to do things that were important for me to do. And it turns out I think I was asking the wrong questions of myself. I kept asking myself, too, why isn't this getting done? Why can't I get myself to do this? And the better question to ask is, what does my brain actually need to get started? And once I started asking that question, then everything got a lot more interesting. So let me give you the framework I've been thinking about my motivation. I saw that some people have called it different things. They have different frameworks for it. And the framework is the idea that how do you get a person, particularly someone with an ADHD brain like myself, to respond to tasks? And I spent a lot of time trying to understand what resonated with me. So hopefully you will find some ways that it can resonate with you too, even if you don't have ADHD, but sometimes you find that you're having a hard time motivating. So my version is called Spark. I wanted to use Spark because I like that idea of creating a fire. That when you get a little bit of, a campfire person, or you catch a little bit on fire, then it starts to take. Because it's literally what I need when I am stuck. And what I found that I was doing was actually guilting myself into getting myself done. Jill, you just have to do this. You need to do this. Jill, you don't want to be a slacker and you don't want to fail at work. And I would just threaten myself into it. I would threaten myself into doing it and try to guilt myself into doing it. And you know what? It kind of worked, but it doesn't always work. And it was detrimental just to my, stress levels. And I thought, maybe I needed a checklist. The checklist didn't help. Maybe I needed reminders, and sometimes the reminders didn't help. And what I decided is I need a spark. So there we go. We're going to go through this. Spark stands for story, purpose, adventure, reality, or kickstart. And so we'll walk through each one of these. So story, as you might have noticed if you watch any of my videos, I'm a story person. I can remember any detail if it's part of a story. I'm not so good with random facts. I care about the story behind the facts. And then you'll see that through all my podcasts. I don't care to know that a bird exists. I care to spend 3 hours going and looking for it and finding their babies waddling along a road in a marsh. I don't care that someone invented a technology for the sake of inventing a technology. I want to know about the story of it, the unlikely events, the chain of things that happened that led to its creation. So for me, story is important. Story is one of the most important things. I look in the Bible too. I care about the people who lived, the conflicts, the choices that they had, the consequences they had from their choices. So the story always sticks with me. So when I'm stuck on a task, the first thing I ask myself is, what's the story here? Do I need to research a topic? I just don't say, here, go read this article. I ask, why is this thing interesting? Why is this thing really fundamental? What's the story here that's going to make lives better? And suddenly I'm not doing homework. I'm hunting for something. I'm trying to educate myself about something. And so it's the same true. Like I'm trying to prepare for podcasts and do that. I don't sit there and look and say, well, what do I need to cover today? I ask what surprised me about a book or an idea. What changed my thinking? Where did it change my behavior? Or did I tell my friend about it over lunch because the story was so compelling? Stories create curiosity in our own selves. And so the curiosity actually creates momentum, movement, action. And so if you're stuck on something, why don't you ask yourself, not what is it that needs to be done, but what makes this interesting? What makes this an advantage? Ask what the story behind it is first. The P stands for purpose. So what benefit is this? Maybe it's a single, relatable motivation that I found. If I think about things and I don't know for myself what it will do for myself or someone else, I won't do it. And I think a lot of us are wired this way. A project that feels abstract um, means nothing to us until we remember there's a real person on the other side of it. So if I'm working on an episode that just doesn't feel like it's going anywhere, or I'm struggling to write it, I think about the person who needs to hear it. If I'm doing something at work, the thing that I noticed, and this is how I got myself to work early on and become a good employee, is I think about the person on the other side who needs that. I need, to understand why that person needs that thing entirely. So you can sit there and say, oh, I worked in IT and this person needs this mouse, whatever. And, instead you think, oh my gosh, Bob is getting on an airplane in 2 hours and now his mouse doesn't work and it's going to make the whole rest of his trip impossible if he doesn't have a good mouse. I'm going to go get that to him right away. But even now, I work in IT, and you think about the person who needs that thing on the other side. They need that account created for their employees so they could teach them how to work their job. You think about the story of it. If I feel like I'm doing a task and it feels tedious, I remember how much confusion it's going to prevent, how much it's going to make someone who is a person who works with patients, their lives easier. Their lives are already hard. And if I can help them, it's going to make their lives easier. So sometimes I just don't sit down and record the thought. I sit there and think, why is this important? Why is this going to help this person get through something, do something better? And it helps because I found that basically I work in a career that helps other people. I learned this about myself, that I cannot work in a job that doesn't help other people. And when I understand how it helps me doing something helps them help other people, now the task has shifted for me. The work hasn't changed, the purpose has. And so the easiest way for me to unlock motivation is to stop asking, okay, what is it do I have to do? And start asking me, who does this help and why does it help? That question has rescued me more times than I can count. The next thing is an A for adventure. And this probably is my favorite one, even though not everything's an adventure. And the reason I like birding so much is it's sort of built-in permission to go on tiny adventures. You'll leave the house, you go birding, you go for a hike. You're not sure what you're going to see. You're not going to know what's going to happen. You might just see a common robin that day, or there have been days where I have seen a beaver so angry, he is flapping his tail on a river, making a noise that sounds like a gigantic rock. Or a few weeks ago, I saw baby hatchlings that were little tiny fuzzballs with tiny beaks walking around their moms. You don't know what you're going to see. And so to me, that adventure makes it energetic for me. And so adventure contains possibility. Possibility is motivating in a way that obligation simply isn't. Now, not every task can become a great adventure. Folding laundry is just folding laundry. And so I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But there are a lot of tasks that can become little experiments, little explorations or quests. And so if I need to exercise, instead of going, oh gosh, I need to get on the treadmill today, I try to wonder to see, maybe I could go for a walk. What will I see today? Or if I'm doing something mundane in a task, maybe I'm going to learn something new. Maybe I'm going to learn how to use this tool better instead of, oh boy, I guess I have to try to figure this out now. I wonder what this thing actually can do for me. And so if I need to solve a problem, instead of going, I guess I just have to deal with it, I try, I wonder what I can figure out. I wonder what other applications I can use to make this tool work better for me. You can tell why I have an AI podcast now. So the difference is the language, which is very small, but it's emotionally very different. Obligation drains us, but discovery, experiments, invention, that same task with a different frame, that is energizing. So the next one comes reality. And this one I want you to be careful with because it can be useful, but it can also be very easy to misuse. And reality just means that actions or lack of actions have consequences and choices matter. And what I do today affects me tomorrow. And so that can be true and very motivating as well. So there's a difference, I think, between using reality and fear. For a long time, I mostly used fear. And fear sounds like if you don't exercise, you're going to end up old and broken and you're going to miss everything in life and you're never going to be able to go hiking again. Maybe true, but very fearful. That version works, but it's exhausting and it's stress inducing and it starts to make everything feel like a punishment instead of having a purpose. And so the real version I'm trying to do sounds just a little bit different. Instead of focusing on what I might lose, I focus on what I'm building. Every workout is a vote for a future hiking trip I'll be able to take. Every healthy choice I make is a vote for future mobility, a future of years of healthy living. Every time I show up for something is hard, I am preserving my future as independent. Every time I do a task at work, which seems like it might be a slog, I am pushing myself to become a better employee in this company and have more opportunities for myself in the future. It's still a reality. Stakes can be real. The negatives can still be real. But I'm trying to build into something rather than running away from something. And I find that particularly motivating. And the question comes back a lot. You'll ask yourself, what kind of future am I trying to build with this choice? Not everything is dramatic, and sometimes it's kind of quiet, but today's choices are a vote. And so you have to figure out what it is you're voting for. I always think about there's a phrase that it said, I think it's talked about like good and evil, but I use it for almost everything. That a kid said, oh, well, there's good and evil in the world, Dad. What is that about? And the dad said, this I think is a very old story. There are two tigers inside of you, a good tiger and a bad tiger. And then the kid says, well, which one's going to win? And he said, the one you feed. And I think about that all the time. Is the Jill who is capable when she's 80 years old of still getting out and going for a hike? Am I feeding that tiger? Or am I feeding the tiger that Jill's going to be bound to her chair and needing care instead of going out and having, activities that I love doing? Every day is a vote. Every action is a vote, and you have to decide what it is you're voting for. So then comes the K in Kickstart. And this last one is probably the most practical, and maybe it's the most important of them, because there are some days where there aren't stories. There's some days where maybe the purpose isn't really working, or there's really no adventure in this, or maybe even reality isn't really functioning the way you hoped it would in this particular case. You think about it, you're tired, you're scattered, you're overwhelmed, and nothing is clicking. And so when you kickstart, that can actually save the day for you. And so the quick start asks one very simple question. What is the smallest next possible step? Not the whole project. Don't think about the whole goal. Just a very small next action. Instead of, I have a pretty big yard. And so I tend to think of it like, I have to mow the lawn, right? There's no threat. There's no story. There's no adventure. There's nothing really there to it. So in those particular cases, I'll say, let's just get out there and mow my front yard. The front yard actually takes under 20 minutes, while it takes me about an hour and a half to mow my whole yard. Let's just do the front yard. I talk myself in the next possible small step. And chances are, okay, yeah, let's just do the front yard. That's fine. Or instead of clean the office, let's just put away 5 things. Instead of exercise, let's just put on our clothes and our shoes and just see what we feel like. It sounds too simple to be useful, but it's very simple, because something I've learned after all these years is that starting is harder than continuing. So it's very hard when you don't have a spark or the adventure or anything like that to get started. But once you get started, then momentum takes over. So I've just witnessed this 100 times in my own life. Like I said, if I just spend, Jill, you just clean for 5 minutes or just mow the front yard. You don't have to do the side or the back. You know what? I have never just stopped. I've always mowed the side and the back, but just convincing myself that all I have to do, and I've mentioned this in this podcast before, when I used to belong to a gym, just show up to the gym in your clothes. You don't have to exercise. You don't have to. Then I get there and I say, okay, Jill, let's just do 5 minutes. You hate it after 5 minutes, you get to go home. And you know what? I never have. So the hard part is crossing the line from being stopped and actually starting. Kickstart exists in that line. You're not committing to the whole thing. You're just committing to take one small step that's small enough. There's really no reason to just not do that small step. You pull the whole thing together now, and so you can kind of see how freeing I find Spark is. You don't need all 5. Usually one of those things is enough. And just pick which is the best for this particular moment or this particular task. Sometimes a story gets you moving. Sometimes a purpose does. Sometimes it's an adventure. And sometimes it's the next small step. The goal isn't to engineer a perfect motivation. The goal is to find the spark, whatever it is, and let it do its job. A lot of us have spent years trying to become productivity machines, waking up already motivated, already disciplined, already on fire to do the to-do list. And while you hear about those people a lot in podcasts and on YouTube channels, I've never met that person. I don't know if you've had. Most of us need a spark. We need to remember why a thing matters. We need to remember the story or who it's helping or the purpose or maybe what the next small, tiny step is. And it's not a flaw. It's just being human. Most of us, the meaningful things that I have in my life started with some kind of spark, a curiosity, a bird I didn't recognize, a question that I couldn't get let go of, an episode that I started to write, and then I just started with one initial sentence. Success is usually not dramatic. It's quiet. It's one tiny spark, followed by another tiny spark, followed by another tiny spark. Eventually, you'll look up and realize you've really built something. I think myself, I got caught up in, Jill, you shouldn't have to do all this stuff just to get daily work done. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Just do it, gut it out and make it happen. And you realize there's no real reason that you have to be cruel to yourself. Use what tools you have to get you to do something. To me, the best thing I can do is put eyeballs on it. I think about that person who really needs that mouse before their plane takes off. I think about that person on the other side of the phone call who really needs me to get the account created for her employee so she can start tutoring him on how to do his job. That's it. So I think the next time you're sort of staring at something and you can't seem to start, just remember spark, story, purpose, adventure, reality, and kickstart. You don't have to ask how to force yourself through something or threaten yourself through something. Just figure out what spark you're missing right then. You might be surprised how quickly things start moving once you actually find it. All right, everyone, thanks so much. Appreciate you being out there. I'm Jill from the North Woods. I appreciate you spending some time with me today. If you have any questions, comments, put a comment right here on the channel if you're watching this on video, or you can email me at Jill@startwithsmallsteps. I appreciate it. And until next time, keep taking those small steps.